So welcome to the press conference in Klagenfurt, Carinthia. This is the English pre-briefing. I will do a German language version as well in a second at 10 o'clock. But now welcome very much to this call for the so-called Westwende. We have now 1 year of Zeitenwende, the turn of times in Europe. And we have critical situation, of course, with the war in Ukraine still going on, and we are doing too little. We have not really done the Westwende in Austria, and I came here to Klagenfurt, the capital of our most southern province, Carinthia, the Kärnten, Koroška in Slovenia, on the way to Slovenia, where I will be tomorrow giving a similar call for the Slovenians to support, of course, NATO membership of Austria, the opening of the labor market, and also the opening of our trade markets towards the West. This is very important. And I call again that Austrian neutrality is immoral, it is irresponsible, it is against European solidarity, and it must be ended now. And I repeat, that all who are involuntarily serving Russia by continuing neutrality, they are either badly informed or very much connected to Russia in one way or the other. And I'm really sorry for them, because there is no justification for staying neutral anymore. And there is also no justification for continuing our protectionist xenophobe politics in so many areas. And of course, this must change, and especially here in Carinthia, I'm calling to change exactly that. And here we have a situation where I have analyzed the Austrian lost Zeitenwende, the need for a Westwende in 5 different sectors. Obviously the strategic Zeitenwende, the NATO membership, the trade policy, that we have to have a free trade agreement with America, that we have to open our markets towards Mercosur, towards the West, that we have to be more proactive and supportive of EU enlargement politics. This is so important. And we have to open our labor market, obviously, permanently to the Ukrainians, permanently to the Balkan people. This must be. We need a lot of people now in Austria anyhow on our labor market. So it's the optimal time frame to allow all EU candidate countries to come to Austria permanently to work here. Not the same rights as EU citizens, that's for later, but the same rights like our workers have as well. If you have employment, you get also residence and work permit. So simple, so clear, so good. And of course they should also stay. More people is better for Austria. We have 1.5 million more people in the last 30 years, and we have got much richer by doing so. And this is exactly the way we have to be. Also in the issue of energy politics. We have to distance ourselves from Russia, and we have to boycott Russian energy and trade. That we continue to import Russian energy, especially gas, is absolutely inexcusable. There is no reason for that. Technically, economically, the only reason is that we have this treaty which was concluded in 2018 by Kurz, and we have to break it. It's absolutely a treasonous treaty. It is wrong. And many people have earned, some people around Kurz, mainly Schüssel, they have earned a lot of money with this treaty. They don't want to be paid back, nor they want to have it exposed. That's the only reason why we continue this. And obviously the political background in Austria, that we have, unfortunately, many parties who have received Russian funding via this energy treaty, and they don't want to have this exposed. But it must be. We must break this OMV treaty. We must also nationalize the gas sector, nationalize the cost. We must withdraw from the Russian market. All our companies must withdraw. It's a very expensive operation. I know many of them will have to be compensated for political risk. This will all be very expensive. I have made already my call to pay this on a European scale. Yes, we must do that. We must share the costs. It will be all very expensive. But all those people who said it is such a great business in Russia, it was always with huge political risk attached, and the taxpayers will pay all the costs of the few who had made great business. Yeah? It's a shame, but there is no other way. Continuing to keep on funding Russia or doing as if we had profits from Raiffeisen in Russia, and in reality we can anyhow not pay out the dividends. It's absolutely ludicrous policy. It is wrong. And of course our kind of submissive policy towards Russia, it is absolutely wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Now Schallenberg has done another kind of spectacular submissive gesture to allow these 18 MEPs into the OSZE in Vienna at the first year of the war anniversary. What a disgrace for Austria. We are now in all Eastern European countries, but Hungary, which is as well a similar problem than Austria, all countries from the Baltics to the Balkans, we are seen as treasonable people. You know, we have done a big strategic mistake. And it would have been very easy to block them, not issuing visa, what they can do. They are waging a war at the moment, Russia against us economically. They can add it to the many lawsuits we have. But Schallenberg wanted to make this gesture because he was always the softest for the dictators, the friend of the Iranians and of the Russian dictators for so long. And there's a reason for it. It's called his smart appeasement policy, but it has led us into this war together with Macron and Scholz. Yeah? And anyhow, he should resign, absolutely. It would be over necessary. Yes, why we have not managed to really have substantial change in Austria? There are several big reasons, underlying reasons. Yeah, it is first of all very much often connected with neutrality, and that's why it's not only strategically, it's also politically to end neutrality, because under the cover of neutrality we distance ourselves from the West. We claim moral superiority to the rest of NATO and to the rest of Europeans, which we don't have. We somehow pretend that we wouldn't be in the EU, and that is also leading to a lot of anti-European feelings. We somehow tell the Austrians that the rest of the world doesn't really concern us, and that's this neutrality lie, because we never wanted to be neutral. It was a deal which was offered by the Soviets. It was the only deal available. They had the tanks in Vienna. What to do? Raab and Figl had to accept neutrality. There was no other way, but they never always wanted to be in the West. The American politicians and officers have offered a military protection in case of attack. And obviously it was good to get the Soviets out of Vienna and Lower Austria and Mühlviertel. That was all very good, but it was in 55, and since 1995, it's 28 years, we are in the EU. And we should somehow gradually arrive in reality. But we are not. We are keeping on this kind of Austrian exceptionalism, this claim that we are the special chosen people, and we are somehow continuing that. And based on that, we continue to be anti-American. We have this very dumb provincial protectionism against Mercosur, against TTIP, against CETA. Everything American is bad because whatever is the underlying reason, they have defeated us in World War I. I don't know what is, or what is the reason. Or it's a virulent anti-Americanism in Austria, which is rampant, and I'm deeply ashamed. I want to apologize. That's why I also have the American flag here, and I want to deeply apologize, profoundly sorry for this. It is absolutely unjustified. The Americans have protected us and liberated us from the Nazis. Let's not forget, most important, have protected us from the Soviet Union, have rebuilt us after World War II from the misery and the rubble of the destruction of World War II, have protected us from the Soviet Union, have kept us safe during the Yugoslav war, and have helped us to liberate Kosovo and Bosnia and ended the genocide by Serbia there. They have then also contributed massively now to the victory of Ukraine, the pending victory, hopefully. But without them, certainly we would have been completely lost, because Merkel has totally unarmed us, and so on and so on. So overall, we are still part of the American system, and we will always be. It's here Pax Europiana speaking, but let's be very serious. The post-war role model and institutional framework is American built, and it's very good, because America is the beacon of democracy, the city of the hill, the blessed country which helps us to reign in authoritarian dictatorships since 100 years and counting, and it will continue to do so. So let's be a little bit less anti-American, please, my Austrian socialist, communist and nationalist and Christian and liberal friends. It's all very disgraceful what you propose. Only one Austrian MP has spoken up has spoken for America and has explained it. Mr. Engelberg, thanks a lot. One good guy among 183, at least one righteous who is pro-American in the Austrian parliament. Yes, this deeply rooted anti-capitalism and anti-Semitism, always connected with these American prejudices, you know, the East Coast, and so on and so on. That's deeply rooted in Austria. And I know what I'm talking because I know many Austrians actually, and I love my country, by the way. Thank you for my Serbian friends who claim that I'm anti-Austrian. I'm just anti-neutrality, I'm anti-Semitist, and I'm anti-nationalism, and I'm just a humble pro-European federalist, yeah? And I'm also criticizing one of the big problems we have in Austria is this deep-rooted anti-EU populism and the lack of information in the media, because they often really don't know what they're talking. And the best example is the trade policy, which is so much the key to prosperity, and I'm calling for that one. Then we have a massive problem with the Russian energy sector and the buying of influence via the kickback system in this sector. I also learned in Ukraine about that. I didn't know before. It is very massive. It is basically 1% of the volume is then given for the political system of a country which is purchasing energy. That works very well because 7 billion, calculate yourself, it's 1% is no less than 70 million. You can buy a lot of politics with 70 million yearly in Austria, and a lot of politicians. So simple, so easy, and so tragic is the reality of Central Europe. Calculate the same in all countries, Slovakia, Russia, Hungary, and all these countries who are not actively working against it, because you can work as a political elite, you can say no, you don't do that. But of course it needs courage and some cohesion, and it needs also to some real national effort to block Russian access into the political system. And then we have, of course, this left-wing Soviet nostalgia and this right-wing Putin adulation. It's all very disgusting, and I fight it consistently. I have therefore also called for Austria to join NATO, my first people's petition. I have close to 3,000 signatures. I have this week, I will cross the 3,000. And then the opening of the labor market for the EU candidate countries. I have now 400 signatures, but counting. And I have started now the third people's petition, yes to the free trade agreement with Austria, from Austria, also from the EU, from all countries together, because we have a common European trade policy, which is the basis of our prosperity, the EU customs union and the common trade policy, and that's very good. And that we should support, and we have a number of trade agreements which I'm supporting here, and that's very good. So I will come back to that one. Now I want to talk about this issue of the scandal between Austria and Slovenia, because I'm in Carinthia now, and this is our most southern province. It's called Carinthia. We are a federal state. We have the neighbor Slovenia. It's a EU member, and there is always a Slovenian minority. We had this political struggle about the exact border delineation with the breakup of the monarchy. There was an American officer actually to help us to have self-determination and a referendum in 1920. There was a real border war, and there is always a long-standing conflict, and America has helped us to stay free as Carinthia in 1920 and again after the Second World War. This was fair, this was good, and this was absolutely how it should be. And Slovenia is a role model. That now in this Corinthian election, the nationalists have said they are afraid of Sloveniazation of Carinthia. I can only see Slovenia as a role model. I'm not one saying we should have all the Slovenians in Austria or whatever, but the rights of the Slovenians are protected. We have just a historic peace agreement in that issue, 100 years of peace in 2020. This was really very good. It's a role model for the integration, and it should be much better. We should be proud to have this successful settlement with our minorities, and then to have such a scandalous statement, I completely reject it. What I see, on the contrary, we should have a much bigger strategic partnership with Slovenia, and understand that Slovenia is an extremely successful country. It's already in NATO. It has the NATO Alpine Training Center, which we could have as well if we were in NATO. So the Slovenians did everything right. Yeah? The Slovenians are also providing weapons to Ukraine. Very good, because they don't hide among neutrality. They have done not a lot of weapons, but some at least, I don't say Austria should give all the tanks, but we could give all the old tanks and buy new tanks. So our guys have the new tanks, we can afford it, and the Ukrainians have now, when they need it, the old tanks they can use. Give the Leopards to Ukraine. That is very good. They are much better in the Balkan politics, in the Kosovo politics. They are really supportive. They are really investing. Much better Slovenia on that front as well. On the trade politics, have you ever heard about populist grandstanding that Slovenia will block Mercosur? Maybe also there the farmers are worried. Yes, that's why we have a very sophisticated trade policy agreement with Mercosur, and it's very beneficial, and we need it important for the stabilization of the agricultural markets, and we have also an agriculture policy to support the farmers. And but then it's only one Alpine country which comes and imposes its blockade politics on EU trade policy. We are 450 million people, but the 9 million Austrians represented by the miserable political protectionist xenophobe elite which is in power, they do this shameful. We block Mercosur. We should be much more like Slovenia and understand that this is very important for global trade and for global economic stability, and not impose our kind of bizarrities on the world via the leverage we have. Otherwise we are getting to be some kind of Alpine Cyprus and we are in Hungary, and we are on the way anyhow for that tragic position. Yes, in the energy politics, also the Slovenians much better. They have a reasonable thing. They have a nuclear power. That's a decent thing. They have moved it away from Russian fuel. They have done a lot of good things. They have tried to be energy independent. And they are also a complicated country on that one, by far not as good as it should be, but they are at least trying harder than we do. And of course, in European politics, in pro-American politics, you don't see the same. Also in Slovenia, many things are not okay. I will discuss this tomorrow. I'm not here to admire Slovenia endlessly, but to call it a role model, I think yes, when you see that Slovenia today, 30 years after the end of Yugoslavia and when its independence, 30 years, is today in a position where, according to the statistical yearbook of the European Union, Eurostat, they are at 108. I repeat, I have here the numbers. 108 is Carinthia, 106 is Eastern Slovenia. Western Slovenia. Eastern Slovenia is a bit below. I have to check that. It's 74. Burgenland, that's our eastern region in Austria, is at 88. Yeah? So they have not fully caught up but they are on par with Carinthia now, Western Slovenia. And they are Eastern Slovenia, because they have two so-called European NUTS regions, that's the statistical regions. The poorer one is still below our poorest one. They were in Yugoslavia. It's of course more difficult to catch up, but they are doing quite a lot. Yeah? They are now the most successful country of the new members with 30,000, 29,000 GDP in dollar terms. Yeah, that's quite good, I think so. We have 53. Let's not forget, Slovenia was at 10,000 in 95, and we were at about 30,000. So we have not even doubled our GDP. And that's a quite miserable performance. Yeah. Sorry for that. And we have not really managed to double our GDP. And yes, per capita I'm talking, and the Slovenians have tripled their GDP, so that's quite impressive, and I'm congratulating the Slovenians for that. Yeah, so Slovenia, absolutely a role model, and I can just applaud Slovenia. Yes, I will now then discuss all the various aspects of why Austria should join NATO, and why we should have trade policy, and why we should deliver tanks to Ukraine, and why we should end our neutrality, why we should join the EU training mission, why Austria is very happy to have a partnership with the Vermont National Guards, and now in June will be first time coming the F-35 to Austria. This is really very good, and we should be very proud about that one. And we should also then celebrate the completion of the Austrian Western integration. This must be the target. This is what I'm fighting for. This is what should be the national strategic aim of all Austrians. This is the way to complete our Western integration. That's why I'm collecting signatures. That's why I'm doing now the third tour It's 2.5 tours, let's call it. I had a smaller tour in January, now in March, and I think I will also go to the Western states later. I will have to see my time planning. But we have to also explain that it's very good to be in this economically successful system, which is called globalization, because similar like this kind of satanization of NATO, of the EU trade policy, it's somehow discovered in the last years in Austria, when I return now, that globalization is, according to Mr. Karas, something we have to fight. And also the Austrian National TV, fight globalization. What is wrong with globalization, and what is wrong in Austria to fight it? Yeah? When you look in the last 20 years, from 2000, the big progress of Austrian policy towards Eastern Europe, European policy, was to integrate 100 million new Europeans into the EU, and it has been utterly successful. The Romanians have 8 times the GDP they had in 2000. It's absolutely amazing. And on a global scale, we had about in 1990, when the Cold War was won by the end of the Soviet Union, 30 years ago, we had about 24 trillion euros to global GDP. Now we are at 100. 100. Yeah? This is enormous progress, 4 times quadrupling of GDP. Yeah? The US have 25, the Chinese have 19 or 20 now, and Europe is about the same like China. So this is really amazing. Together the West has about half of the global GDP still today. And it's enormous, yeah. And the prosperity has grown enormously in the world, yeah. We have additionally not only 5.5 billion people, but 8 billion. This is an enormous figure. We should be really very happy about it, yeah. And we should celebrate this prosperity, and we should support globalization, because it has eradicated a lot of poverty. Not all the problems of the world are solved, mainly because we still have Russia doing a lot of criminal activities. We have, of course, the conflict with radical Islam. We have, of course, a lot of natural disasters and a lot of injustice in the world. Yes, we have not been able to eradicate all the world poverty and all the world disasters. Yes, we must do more, but we will do already much more by defeating Russia, getting rid of the Russian petroleum and carbon industry, and of course with the Wagner soldiers, what they do on terrible killings in Africa. So what we need to do is more free trade agreements, and we have to isolate Russia and Iran as hostile states, and we have to conclude 10 more free trade agreements. Here's the logic. We have to include one with the Philippines, with the African Union, with Mercosur, with India, with Australia, with Indonesia, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, with Pakistan, and of course with the United States of America. And it's really not understandable why we don't have with our strongest allies, which have defeated the Nazis, contained the Soviets, reconstructed Europe, helped us in the Balkans, helped us in Ukraine, have been always open for us in many aspects of global cooperation all the time along, and we are not able to conclude a simple free trade agreement because of the chlorinated chicken or because of genetically modified food, yeah, or that's so important, is it, yeah? And we cannot find a settlement on some issues like this, yeah. We impose our worldview on the Americans, and they don't allow us into the procurement systems, and we claim that's a good thing to do. No, obviously, we have to have an agreement. And the French have, of course, blockaded it, the German Social Democrats, the very same people who have sold us to Russia. The very same people who have sold us to Russia in the energy sector have blocked us in the trade sector with America. And of course, they have, we can really, when we write the history of this trade agreement with America, we will know exactly who is responsible. And it's a disaster. Of course, we can in some, I have made a spelling mistake. I'm always prone to make spelling mistakes. That's of course one thing. Sorry, I have also one small sip of coffee, yeah. Yes, we need, of course, a trade agreement with America, and we need one fast, yeah. And then on the very same day when President Lula, the center left-wing leader of Brazil, is getting sworn in and flies to America, and it's a big celebration, and the world is celebrating. We have no national populist anymore, and we have then the situation that Mr. Kogler, our Vice Prime Minister, is then defending Mercosur and also saying what he said, Austrians' rejection of Mercosur stays on. It's for me an absolute mystery how one serious man, Mr. Kogler is a serious man, he goes and he imposes his vision of the world on the Brazilians and the Argentinians, on the Europeans. He says they don't do enough for the agriculture, for whatever, for the Amazonas, while now just was elected the president who is ending all this Bolsonaro Amazonas politics. And in the EU, the only leverage we have, besides sending warships like in the past, we have always sent warships as Europeans to other parts of the world to impose our trade policy. Now today the only way we have is to ask them kindly, we open our markets, you behave nicely for your people and for your forests. That's what we do. And he should actually know. And it's very, very, for me, intellectually and personally disappointing to have such statements by Mr. Kogler. That's one of the reasons why I have started with this free trade agreement. Please sign for the free trade agreement with USA, Mercosur, the turn to the West, the boycott, weg, I have to, another, weg von Russland, genau, to break with Russia and Europe open to the free world. That's my slogan here. Free trade for a better world. Some of you might know I have campaigned in Cancun for that. And we should also have a new mandate for the Austrian Parliament to have an EU trade agreement with the US, and also to have the NATO membership as part of the Western integration and the integration of Ukraine in EU 37, and of course a trade embargo against Russia by July 2023. And these are the trade agreements I think are the most important at the moment with ASEAN, here the Philippines and Indonesia, with Mercosur, with the African Union, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, with Australia, with India, with Uzbekistan, and that all until 2024, and that will anyhow come. I'm confident, according to my information when I was in Brussels, there will be a lot of preparations in that direction. And of course we have to break with Russia. This is very important, to cut the Russian energies, and to have the success of Germany. They have managed more or less to break off gas, coal and oil. That is a major achievement with the help of America. Again, the Americans have been extremely helpful here. But of course the anti-Americans say that was only for the benefit. Most of the price increases were, the benefits went to European energy companies who were on that spot marketing trading, and they have made the big gains, not the American suppliers who sell on a fixed contract basis. Yeah. So we come here then we need also to end nuclear. And on the Austrian aspects, we see of course that we have a completely failed gas policy. We need to end that, so we need to nationalize the gas hub from OMV and sell the rest of OMV to a NATO ally, because only Norway has the money and the possibilities to really lift the Romanian resources, because in Romania they are extremely angry that artificially Austria decided for Russian gas and against Romanian gas, and there is a lot of gas in the Black Sea in front of Romania. We have not lifted it because we didn't have the will, because we were blocked by Schüssel, Putin, to buy Russian gas instead of Romanian, and that was the situation. So it's much better to sell OMV, the 30% the Austrian state has, to the Norwegians, and I reject Magnus Brunner, our Minister of Finance, not doing that. And he has done it in the service of Schüssel, and this is of course very much to be rejected. Grüß Gott allerseits. And then I have here no trade with the enemy, to be very clear. We have to boycott Russia, and we have to isolate and also boycott Russia very clearly, and our Austrian anti-American policy, and break the contract with Gazprom, and this must be nationalized, and the costs are of course extremely expensive for the Austrian taxpayers. I understand and I feel the pain, and of course that's not so easy, but we need to do that, and we need to do that very fast. So the fourth dimension after energy, trade and strategic is the European membership. Of course, we need to Europeanize our Austrian policy. It's the enlargement. We have only in the last moment agreed for Ukraine to join. And that was really and now it is still today the whispering campaign that this was not so serious is starting. I've seen many of the MEPs from Austria saying it's not so serious, and it's serious, and we should really do that. Of course, we should also open the labor market permanently for the Ukrainians and for all the Western Balkan people. All EU candidates should have permanent access to the Austrian labor market and to the EU labor market. And of course, we need to break the urbanization of the Austrian People's Party. Mr. Nehammer is now clearly in the hand of Orban, and he is the useful idiot of Orban. You can say that very clearly. And of course, we need to support Romania and Bulgaria in Schengen. And that was really a tragic toxic, evil scheme which was then developed in November by Orban, Vucic, Nehammer and Schüssel in the background to somehow manipulate against Romanian and Bulgarian interests and European interests of European unity, because Schengen membership should be and is in the European interest. And then we didn't do that. And we managed to have this total crisis. And again, Austria is completely isolated. And we are part of Orban's scheming together with the Croatian president, the Serbian president, and all these Rosatom activities. And that is very nefarious, and I'm rejecting that. So we should break free from the Orban's stranglehold. We should also avoid then further sanctioning of the Austrian companies in Romania, because there is a lot of consumer boycott now. That's really bad, and we should try to completely withdraw from the Russian market. So we should be more on the Romanian market, more on the Bulgarian market, more on the Balkan market, and less on the Russian market, because none of the investments will be profitable anymore. And yes to Schengen for Romania and Bulgaria, and no to this axis. Specific proposal from mine is also to have the EU Parliament already elected on that we have observer elections in 2024 for the 9 candidate countries. That's very important, and I'm completely in favor of that one. Then also to have the European Commemoration Day for the Mariupol genocide. That's very important. Russia is a terrorist state. We must condemn Russia clearly. I was in Mariupol myself in February 2022, and I've seen Mariupol when it was still standing. Russia has destroyed it. Putin has destroyed it because Mariupol resisted his kind of advancement in May 2014, and he came back then in March 22 to completely destroy and punish the population for their resistance to his schemes. And they are now killed or dead, and thousands, 10,000 have died there. And this is exactly what happens when you appease dictators. We knew very well, I think most of us knew from 99 on what Putin is, at least me, I was very clear. And I remember many speeches of Mr. Habsburg, Mr. Rübig, we knew who he was. And he has killed so many people in Chechnya in 99. But okay, some needed, like Ischinger, they needed not one war in Georgia, not one war in Ukraine, they needed for 2022 the full-scale invasion. But this is exactly happened when you always leave him to do one war in Syria, killing 500,000, and then intervening, putting himself as a peacemaker. And so you allow all these things, you never confront him, you never contain him, and then ultimately when he is getting in his age, he does his last big thing. And that's exactly what he did. And Macron and also Scholz, they are the chamberlains of our times. They have distanced themselves from Ukraine, and they have led us into this terrible war. And then what we need to do, of course, is now to isolate Russia completely. And it's very important to isolate Russia and take Russia out of the UN Security Council and take India in. It's 10 times bigger in terms of population. It's a peaceful democracy. India in, Russia out, and that is very important. And as you all know, I'm also preparing the scenario of the breakup of Russia. There's 36 nations hidden, maybe 44, the exact number. We will see how the core of Russia will break up in many different states. But that's all what I now prepare in many ways, and I hope it will happen, and we hope for a Russian spring in 2024 after the loss on the battlefield and the liberation of Mariupol and the NATO membership of Ukraine. Here's my strategy for 2023. West wins, Russia will lose, and Russia will be dismantled. Freedom works, Putin kaput. So simple, so clear. Yes, and Schallenberg's kind of humiliation and submissive gesture towards Putin is of course a sign, and it's a disaster. What we should really do as Austria is of course to take Austria into the Council, also Kosovo should take the seat of Russia in the Council of Europe and in the OSCE. OSCE should exclude Russia, and of course Kosovo must join. That is what, and no Russians dancing in Vienna, obviously. It was a disaster, but it's in the line what Schallenberg has done in all his diplomatic career. There's so many documents. Yeah, he is always the friend of Orban, Iran, Lavrov. The worse the guys are, the better friends of Schallenberg. And Austria, obviously, always the service center for Russian influence, for international spying, and this is outrageous. Yes, I have put all these various aspects of Firtash still being in Austria today, of this famous St. Petersburg visits, of this Putin visits in 2014 during the invasion in the Donbass to Vienna. Also then he coming 2018 to conclude 7 billion over 22 years. The dimension is huge. 7 billion, I repeat, take or pay for over 22 years. Yeah. Such a long-lasting kind of submissive contract. And of course the role of Deripaska in Austrian politics, of Schüssel, of Leitl, of Firtash, and of Fischer, and Nehammer's visit in April 2022, and now again this 18 MPs, and it's all connected to a long-lasting man friendship between Wolfgang Schüssel and Vladimir Putin, and of course with the love of the Social Democrats for Russia, expressed by Mr. Fischer, Heinz Fischer. Yes, we have all these points. I have made it already very clear why all this happens. I have this podcast. I have also the clear accusation that this is treason to stay neutral. And I have these 15 points, Austrian Atlantic Charter coming from Austria to join NATO, enlargement for Kosovo, Ukraine, Bosnia, Moldova and the EU, Austrian arms for Ukraine, Austria joining EU training mission, Austria to boycott Russia and end all energy imports from Russia, and then yes to the FTAs with Mercosur, Africa, Gulf and India and Australia. Then yes to the EU enlargement with Ukraine and Kosovo by 2009. Yes to the UK rejoining, because they have already this now this agreement, so 2029 is the right moment to return. Then yes to the NATO nuclear deterrent, optimist, that's very important for our safety. And yes to European nuclear power, and that is absolutely very important. I will talk about that one in a separate People's Petition in the future. Yes, opening the Austrian labor market for EU candidates, and then EU debt-funded infrastructure, Eurobonds, very much needed to rebuild Ukraine, rearm Europe, EU nuclear deterrent, and also the energy transition and the infrastructure towards the Balkans, towards Turkey, towards Ukraine. That's very much needed and must be paid by the European Union, and fast so. 2 trillion package, absolutely needed. And the euro for all, very important. I have discussed in this podcast many times for Ukraine. The euro immediately a firm fundament for reconstruction. No separate currency experiments. We do it like in Kosovo and Montenegro, the euro, and this is the best policy for all. And the reform of the UN by ceding the French seat to the EU and also the Russian seat to India. And then the isolation of Serbia, because Serbia was allowed now to run away again from this meeting, supposed peace meeting, but they allowed Serbia to escape back to Belgrade, and he didn't sign, and we will have a very difficult month on the Balkans again. And of course, I call for the recognition of Kosovo, and until then, Serbia must be isolated. And 15 is the support the transformation of Russia and best the dismantlement of Russia. We must prepare the public on this, and I'm doing my best to do that. Yes, the continuation of neutrality is immorality and is high treason against Europe, Kosovo, Bosnia and Ukraine, and Austria must be isolated by the EU, and it's already happening. You know, I don't call for sanctions against Austria. That would be probably too much, but isolated Austria is. Yeah? Who wants to sit? Orban and Neham are the last man standing of Putin. It's a disaster. And we are more and more, all my friends from Eastern Europe think that we are traitor. I just repeat, because I see, after my 20 years living there and working with them, I see the world like them. In Austria, maybe that's smart balancing. I see it treasonable policy, and I'm disgusted. Yeah, I will continue my tour now to Slovenia, and then to Linz, and then to Podgorica, Tirana, and back in Vienna. And I'm looking forward. Thanks for your support. And I will also release a German-speaking video in a second. Thanks a lot. More to come from Pax Europiana, and please support Western integration of Austria. Bye.